and the ABC's BRIDGET BRENNAN too. Guys, it does sound like events are about to unfold. Where are we up to?
Yeah, well, that's certainly right, Greg. The Prime Minister has arrived along with what feels like half of Cabinet. We've also got the ABC's Indigenous Affairs Editor, BRIDGET BRENNAN. Good to have you here now.
Great to be here. Just got here in time for the ceremony to begin.
And such an important way to start this conversation today and across this long weekend is this dance, which I wonder if you want to give us a bit of a sense of the importance of Boonwurrung dance as a measure of storytelling.
Well, the Gumatj clan, this is their land on Gulkula in northeast Arnhem Land, down in this sacred land, very special ceremonial land. And this is not just about the political discussions and those weighty topics, it's very much about the Yolngu people sharing their culture, their history in a very generous way with Australian people. And that ceremony is a traditional opening. And they also welcome the Prime Minister, of course, as a dignitary, and other dignitaries here and other Australians here. And it's many generations dancing, often a fire dance, the Gumatj dance. It's one of their dances. Their totem also, the crocodile, features in some of these dances. So it's just a beautiful opening. And after 2 years where festivities have been interrupted by the pandemic, it's just terrific to be here and see them finally coming together.
It certainly is. There's been such a sense of anticipation to get to today. I know that even in just the last couple of days there was a bit of unsureness about whether the Garma Festival would go along because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that new wave of Omicron that we're seeing right across the nation right now. There are lots of precautions in place here. Many dignitaries, as Bridget just mentioned, including Carolyn Kennedy, the new US ambassador to Australia, who's been in the country for under 72 hours. Her first visit to the Northern Territory, straight out to here to Gumatj country, where she met with the leadership last night. As we are waiting for that formal part of this ceremony to get underway, and Bridget touched on there the fire story and about the way that dancers impart here a way of telling stories without words. It's a way that stories have been shared for tens of thousands of years, that and song, but also stories and sitting down yarning. Well, all of those things come together on a weekend like this, don't they?
They really do, and all the clans come together. In fact, Aboriginal people from across the Northern Territory and across Australia are coming here, as well as, of course, non-Indigenous people. And those clans are very much presenting to Dr. Gallaroi Yunupingu. This is his land, we're on his land, and there's growing autonomy on this land for the Yolngu people. And Dr. Gallaroi Yunupingu, I think, has been very much at the centre of political discussions for many decades, but particularly down in the past 5 years since the Uluru Statement from the Heart was delivered. In fact, at Uluru, Dr. Yunupingu sent a delegation of Gumatj dancers to Uluru to take the fire dance, to take the message stick from Yolngu country down to Ananu country for that historic moment when hundreds of Aboriginal leaders came together to present the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And now, Dan, we're having a lot of momentum on what the Prime Minister is going to be saying over this weekend.
There is so much anticipation about just that speech tomorrow from the Prime Minister. Of course, Bridget, we had the case that the Prime Minister, when first winning his election, the first words out of his mouth were about the importance of a voice. He spoke to our colleague Lee Sales on 7:30 saying that having a voice that is embedded, entrenched, enshrined within our Constitution is about good manners. This is about having everyone at the table, a connection from this country, from Yolngu country, directly to the politicians in Canberra, those that are making the decisions, that are sitting right here today.
Yeah, and so of course we've heard him in a lot of speeches and at the opening of Parliament, the first sitting days of Parliament earlier this week. But Dan, this is his first speech in front of Aboriginal people, really, and in front of Aboriginal communities. So there is pressure, I think, on the government to outline not so much just their path towards a potential referendum in the Uluru Statement, of course, treaty and truth-telling embedded in that, but other policies, because we know a lot of change is needed in our communities after the past decade, where in terms of the Closing the Gap strategy, we haven't really seen much change in a lot of those key outcomes and areas.
That was the case with the Productivity Commission report just this week that said of the 17 targets, 4 are on track. When you delve into the detail of those, some of them are even more confronting. The Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, the first Indigenous woman to hold a cabinet post in Australia, the first woman to hold that role as well, said that it is confronting to read that report and that it's an indication that more needs to be done. Commissioner Mokak said, we actually need more data. This refresh is, 2 years old now. There needs to be a greater body and depth of detail, but the data itself, the data sets are as much of a challenge, aren't they, because different states and territories keep data in different ways.
And for a long time, no one was keeping track of where billions of dollars were being spent in Indigenous affairs, and that's where we saw some of those critical failures that the Minister was speaking about. And Dan, I think this does link in with the Uluru Statement and the call for a voice to Parliament, a call for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have a very strong say in the policies that are designed to really close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians.
And we know that there has been a lot of discussion about the tangible outcomes. In fact, Jacinta Price, the new CLP senator, has spoken about this in her first speech to Parliament. Lydia Thorpe, the Greens senator, has also made, interestingly, similar comments where they're saying, actually, what about real tangible change? That's something that the architects of the Uluru Statement, the advocates, say this is actually two sides of the same coin, isn't it? That if you have a voice, then you start to hear what are the challenges and what are the solutions, and then you're able to better hone and focus outcomes and policies, procedures and the like.
Certainly, but I guess one of the arguments that we've heard from people who are sceptical of a referendum or indeed the proposal for a voice is that we've had advisory bodies before in Indigenous Australians, many advisory bodies for different prime ministers, but often they're not listened to or they're not heeded, their advice is not heeded. We know how many reports from committees are sitting on the shelf still. And so I do think the government will need to spell out how this will be different. And of course, if it's embedded in the Constitution, it's permanent, isn't it, Dan? I mean, it can't go away. And if it has the support of Australians, that gives it a great deal of legitimacy. But I think over this weekend, we'll be hearing this debate about how much detail we need on what exactly a voice looks like, how it's designed, how it's elected. And it's important. I think it's important that we have that civil debate about these issues.
And we are seeing pictures right now of the Prime Minister here, not too far behind us as these proceedings are getting underway. We understand that the Prime Minister has been taken to meet with some of the dancers, the performers, to be hearing those stories first-hand. Linda Burney, that we've just touched on, is also here, Bridget.
Yes,
and
she loves to come to Garma, I know. She's next to the Prime Minister, also joined by the new Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, who's had a very busy week with different changes in this new term of Parliament. And so they'll be here. Joined also by the Northern Territory Chief Minister Natasha Files, who just gave a very strong speech. Also Pat Dodson, the Special Envoy for Reconciliation and the Special Envoy to implement the Uluru Statement from the heart, a position he was given by the Prime Minister not long after the election.
And we're also seeing Carolyn Kennedy, the new ambassador to Australia from the United States, as part of those conversations. This is the political leadership, if you will, of Australia meeting some of the Indigenous Australia's leadership. You can start to hear now that chanting, the singing that really leads that start. Bridget, it's so interesting, isn't it, that we have Prime Minister after Prime Minister making this trip to this sacred country, this special land that we're on right now, and this is how it all begins, this performance right now. I think we might take you to see some of that for a moment.
On instructions that the ladies will bow their heads, please, and not look at the dancers that are coming out. Yo, Mainmak. Mainmak indeed. Great to the Mainmak. Ladies and gentlemen, you have
Wow, Bridget, what a spectacular dance performance that we just saw, welcoming the new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to this country in a tradition that has spanned tens of thousands of years, intermeshing the ancient with contemporary and looking to the future.
Yeah, there's something so ancient in that dance by the Gumatja clan there, performed over generations and thousands of years for the Prime Minister and Dr. Gallery Yunupingu, so really heralding the opening of a very special and momentous weekend here at the Garma Festival.
And you see there the leadership from politics federally right here in the Northern Territory. There are other leaders that have gathered here from right across the nation, from Indigenous nations far and wide. I believe we're about to see some more performances as well. But Bridget, this is also about setting the foundations for a series of big conversations over the next couple of days, isn't it, that are looking to the future, as Dr. Yunupingu has written in the foreword to this festival, that now is the time for action, now is the time to take charge.
Yes, Dan, I think that's right, and there is a lot happening. I mean, as we heard from the Northern Territory Chief Minister a little earlier, treaties are being negotiated at, well, in the very, very early stages of planning for many clans and tribes and nations in the Northern Territory and in other states. We've got the government speaking about a referendum to recognise and give Indigenous people a voice. So look, there is a lot happening. There's a refresh Closing the Gap agenda, and there's very serious conversations about how to give First Nations people proper autonomy and power over their own lives, and that will be really central across all the themes: art, education, culture, economic development here at Garma. All of those themes being discussed by very important people.
Absolutely, including those who have gathered here to be a part of the conversation. And this has been an enormous week in Indigenous affairs. We've seen the swearing in of the new Parliament, beginning with that very traditional, powerful welcome to country on Ngunnawal Ngambri land in Canberra, where I'm based, and very fortunate to be living on, I tell you that much. This has also been a week where we've seen the greatest number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander senators, MPs, 11 right across the Parliament, the greatest number in history, from every political walk of life, most states and territories and jurisdictions as well, looking at bringing a whole range of different perspectives into these big discussions, not to mention the government now making the decision to put that aside, that court decision. We have just seen Jack Thompson, who is an honorary member of the Gumatj, who's going to be giving a keynote address tomorrow night as well. But Bridget, you get the sense that there is momentum building, don't you? Yes,
and I think what's really interesting for me is to say, as you were just mentioning, a record number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander parliamentarians in the federal parliament, predominantly women. And in fact, a lot of the conversations around the voice to Parliament, about the referendum, about education, are being led by really strong, intelligent, incredible Indigenous women.
Of which we've got one leading our coverage right here on the ABC News channel today. But Bridget, you can't underestimate how important that leadership is at every level, and including in media, and telling the stories and defining how we have these big conversations.
Absolutely.